Welcome to this explainer. We're launching a full-on forensic investigation today to hunt down and stop nitrosamine formation in our drug products. Now, we aren't here to rehash how to synthesize these impurities. You already know that. Instead, we're going to map out the root cause risk factors so we can actively control them and, more importantly, avoid them altogether.
So, where do these nitrosamines actually come from? How do these risk factors just sneak into the pharmaceutical life cycle? Honestly, it's not magic, right? It really just comes down to three main culprits: the materials we use, the conditions our products face, and the supply chains we rely on.
All right, let's dive right in and look at our two prime suspects. On one side of the equation, we've got nitrosating agents. Think of these as your sources of nitrite sneaking in through water, raw materials, and excipients. On the flip side, we have susceptible amines. We're talking secondary or certain tertiary amines living right there in the API or in its degradants. Here's the kicker. The risk absolutely skyrockets when you put these two together in the same room. So, our entire game plan here? Total avoidance. We want to keep these two factors as far apart as humanly possible.
To do that, here's how we're breaking down our investigation today. We'll look at the suspects, the scene of the crime, the accelerants, the accomplices, and finally, the detective's toolkit.
So, part 1. The suspects are two main risk factors. Now, it is absolutely crucial to remember that just because you spot an amine, it's not an automatic guilty verdict. It's really just a red flag telling you to look closer. Secondary amines are the classic red flag, for sure. But we also have to keep a close eye on certain tertiary amines, and, this is a big one, amines that get liberated by degradation over time. You literally have to screen your entire portfolio for these specific structural features.
Moving on to part 2, the scene of the crime, focusing on materials and excipient variability.
You know, the everyday materials we use often carry these hidden histories. Take processed water, for example. It can easily harbor trace nitrites. Or reagents and catalysts. Those can introduce nitrites or amines right into the mix. But you really need to watch your back with recovered solvents and materials. They have a notoriously murky provenance, and their impurity profiles are all over the map. Handling them demands incredibly strict traceability and rock-solid documented quality controls.
And then we have excipients. They are a notorious major source of nitrites. And the tricky part? The levels vary wildly depending on the excipient type, the grade, the supplier, heck, even from lot to lot from the same supplier. Because of this crazy variability, a single test is really just a snapshot in time. It is absolutely not a guarantee. We have to actively hunt down certified low nitrite grades and constantly, persistently trend that variability using supplier data.
Now, a lot of the time, that susceptible amine is just an intrinsic, essential part of your medicine's active substance. It's a fixed structural flag. We can't exactly go in and easily rewrite a drug's core chemistry, right? Because of that, our mitigation efforts have to focus squarely on the partner factor. We have to ruthlessly reduce and control the trace nitrite contributions coming from our excipients and materials. That is our primary controllable lever.
All right, let's hit part 3, the accelerants, conditions, time, and packaging.
Environmental conditions are essentially the accelerants to our crime. They interact with the materials we just talked about to amplify the risk over time. Think about formulation pH, moisture, and temperature fluctuations during storage and transit. All of these can trigger degradation or speed up reactions. And honestly, a longer shelf life, that simply gives all these sneaky changes more time to happen.
So, what does this all mean? The crucial takeaway here is that a passing grade at release does not mean zero risk a year or two of shelf life. It is the combination of things that drives the risk. If you've got a susceptible amine, plus a nitrate-bearing excipient, plus adverse moisture, plus a long shelf life, boom. These factors interact and they amplify each other. You have to assess the entire formulation holistically, not just in isolation.
Oh, and here is a massive blind spot that people miss all the time. Packaging is part of the product. It is not neutral. Sure, barrier packaging and desiccants are fantastic controls against moisture, but the packaging components themselves, we're talking blister films, printing inks, adhesives, closure liners, you absolutely must assess them directly. You have to be certain they aren't secretly leaching nitrites right into your product.
Which brings us to part 4, the accomplices, equipment and supply chain.
Think about a typical multi-product manufacturing line for a second. Let's say a nitrite-rich product runs on a shared line and leaves a little residue behind. If you run a product with a susceptible amine right after it, that residue can carry over. Suddenly, you've cross-contaminated your batch and introduced a risk factor that your formula wouldn't normally have. This is exactly why strict cleaning validation,
quantified carryover limits, and really careful campaign segregation are 100% mandatory. Now ask yourselves, how do you handle unnotified supplier changes? A routine specification test is only designed to check a predefined set of attributes. If a supplier quietly swaps a solvent or an excipient source behind the scenes, it can completely alter the nitrite profile in a way your basic spec test will entirely miss. It happens. It's a recurring root cause, which is why radical transparency and ironclad change notification agreements with your suppliers are absolutely vital.
Okay, finally, Part 5, the Detective's Toolkit, Root Cause Analysis Tools.
To systematically hunt down all these risks we've talked about, your go-to tool should be the fishbone diagram. It's a cause and effect tool that ensures your investigation is totally comprehensive rather than just piecemeal. By forcing you to ask nitrosamine-specific questions across all the major categories, materials, methods, equipment, environment, and measurement, it pretty much guarantees you cast a wide enough net in your risk search.
Now, while the fishbone gives us the breadth, process mapping gives us the exact location. You literally walk the process step by step. You mark exactly where incoming materials enter, where formulation conditions could spike the risk, and where equipment gets shared or packaged. It essentially builds a treasure map, showing you exactly where to deploy your controls across the life cycle so you can prioritize what actually matters most.
But to feed these tools, you need good data. And honestly, missing data is itself a massive risk factor. An unassessed material, or even a blank answer on a supplier questionnaire, hides potential risk and drives a ton of uncertainty into your conclusions. You've got to use structured supplier questionnaires to aggressively hunt down this data, ask the hard questions about recovered materials, and lock in those change notification commitments.
I want to wrap up this explainer by leaving you with this thought. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. A single non-detectable test result on one batch, that just means your specific method didn't find anything that one time. It leaves a lot of residual uncertainty. So, are you assuming your product is safe just because you haven't looked hard enough yet? You have to keep that detective's hat firmly on. Embrace these root cause tools and relentlessly monitor risk across the entire product lifecycle.